Hello, geographers. It's time to talk about well-being. Better off, worse off. Here are some learning goals for you. Make sure you write these down in pen in your exercise book. You're going to know how WB, that is well-being. Can't be bothered writing well-being every time. Okay, no, you're going to know how well-being is measured. And you're going to know the difference between qualitative and quantitative data. Hint, quantitative is numeric. So, what is a good life? People, and these are all notes, so remember everything that's in white you're going to write down in your exercise book. Yellow, learning goals, write an exercise book. White, notes, write an exercise book. Blue, activity, probably something to do in your exercise book. Reflection, activities in green, again, do in your exercise book. Don't take these notes on an iPad. I could go into a massive rant about why, but just trust me. So, people now want to measure how good your life is by other things than just money. Typically, well-being used to just be measured by, oh, how much pachingis have you got? But turns out that's not the only thing that matters. So we now want to measure well-being, not just bank balance. This is not Grand Theft Auto, people. So you can measure it using indicators that indicate what your well-being is. Yeah, an indicator is a thing that you measure that shows the level of something. Your indicator for your height is centimeters of height. Right, so indicators information have two types, and this is where we come to our second learning goal. Qualitative, that is information about the quality or the nature of something. So like what color a tree's leaves are, or how beautiful a tree is. And the other one is quantitative, that's numeric data. So like how many trees there are or how tall they are. You can graph quantitative data. Qualitative data is better used for writing about. So for example, pretend I got a cup of coffee in my hand. Yeah, the qualitative data would be it's aromatic, it's tasty. The quantitative data would be it's 80 degrees and 200 mils of coffee. So here are some ways that you can, this is just a random slide with different ways to measure well-being. Here are all of the things you could take into account. Environment, safety and security, relationships, mental health, cognitive health, physical health, community, and purpose. What's your purpose? This is for youth, yeah? There's a lot of different ways to measure well-being, and these are 8 of them. Here's an explanation about the difference between quantitative data and qualitative data. Quantitative data are numbers, they're measurable, and they're made with instruments. Qualitative data is by using your senses. So, what is a good life? And do you have one? Where can I find it? So, one way to measure well-being is to look at these things. Social well-being, such as your health, how many friends you got. Political well-being, do you get to vote? Are you oppressed? Whatever. Economic well-being, how much income do you have? How much is coming in all the time? How much wealth have you got in the bank? How much debt have you got? Environmental well-being, is the place you live in polluted? Is it beautiful? Is your drinking water safe? Is your air safe? Is climate change about to destroy your whole planet? Oh, that was the last unit. Anyway. Technological well-being. Do you have access to the internet? Very important at the moment. Yeah. So we can use these measures to compare different places. Buzzword alert. That's one of the SPICES concepts. Yay. So we can compare the health, voting rights, income, pollution, access to the internet of Australia compared to New Zealand, compared to Singapore, compared to Indonesia, whatever. And what might we compare different places to say, oh, they're doing better than us. Why don't we copy them? More ways that you could measure well-being if you wanted to. Right, it's geography, so we're all about maps and graphs, so let's have a look at a map. Before I talk about these, I'm going to give you a few moments to have a think about what it means yourself. write your moments up. So it's a map of world happiness. The happier a country is, the more towards the shade of dark red it is. So Australia's looking pretty good there. The closer to yellow it is, the unhappier it is. So you can see that. Now, how they've measured happiness is a question I would want answered before I took much of this information on board. How do they decide what happiness is? Is it just subjective happiness? Okay, well, how much of the environment they'd have to destroy to produce that happiness? I would also want to know that, because Australia and North America and Saudi Arabia are big destroyers of the environment, and yet they come across as very happy. Anyway. So for all of these videos about well-being, you're going to have a reading task, and that is to read the relevant chapter in the textbook. I've given you summary notes, super summary notes, but you really need to read the full text. Each chapter only takes like 5-10 minutes. So read chapter 9.2, please. And I want to give you 3 simple questions to answer. 1. What's an indicator? 2. What's a qualitative indicator? And 3, what's a quantitative indicator? So give me a definition for the first one, and for number 2 and number 3, just give me an example of each. Let's do a little data activity. There you go. Read the following examples and decide if the statement is qualitative, QL, or quantitative, QNT. So just write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then there's 2 questions about the cartoon at the end there. Easy. And for you Gary Larson fans out there, I hope you appreciate that cartoon, because it's hilarious. Right, how can we measure countries' well-being? Let's find out.
Which countries have grown the fastest in recent years? Many people might name Singapore or Korea. But Poland or Morocco might not readily come to mind. This is because for many decades, we have thought of national growth in terms of GDP, which shows the total value of goods and services a country produces. But what it doesn't show are some of the things that matter most to its people. Things like working public services, clean air, accessible education, safety from violence and harassment, and speaking freely without fear of arrest. So how can these factors be measured? This is where the Sustainable Economic Development Assessment comes in. Using 10 dimensions, it measures not only a country's economic performance, but its social and environmental sustainability, as well as the outcome of its long-term investments. Rather than giving a simple ranking, SEDA shows where countries are doing well and where more work is needed. And using it alongside GDP reveals how effectively a country converts economic growth into improvements in overall well-being. So although GDP growth usually yields some quality of life improvements, a few countries have achieved impressive results without a great deal of resources. After announcing a focus on the safety and well-being of all citizens, Poland made some of the greatest strides in sustainability and governance through policies like funding for renewable resources and establishing a central anti-corruption bureau. Morocco's promotion of women's roles in politics and society, as well as equal rights in marriage and property upon divorce, led to greater gender equality, which correlates highly with overall progress. And the central program in Brazil's successful drive to cut poverty in half cost only 0.5% of their GDP. The lesson from these very different countries is that improving well-being doesn't require a lot of money, but it does require good leadership, clear goals, and policies specifically focused on making the country and the world a better place for its people.
Gross national happiness. Now, gross doesn't mean like, sticky. Gross, this means like all of it, yeah? So GDP means gross domestic product. It's the size of your economy. There's this new idea that's been kicking around for a wee bit now called gross national happiness. So rather than just measuring the size of our economy, perhaps we should start measuring how happy that economy produces, how happy people are in that economy. So check this out.
The Simple Show explains gross national happiness This is the fourth Dragon King of Bhutan, a beautiful country at the eastern end of the Himalayas. He became king at the age of 17 in 1972. It was then when he had to decide what should be the philosophy behind his reign. He looked at other countries and noticed in most of them the government and the people strive for economical wealth. And those few who achieve this goal usually live a comfortable life. But on the downside, many other people live in misery, poverty, or social isolation. Also, in the ruthless hunt for money, huge parts of the environment are often destroyed. This couldn't be the right path for Bhutan. The concept of gross national happiness was born. The primary idea of GNH is that every human being aspires for happiness, and a country's development should also be measured in its citizens' happiness. The fourth Dragon King's challenge, therefore, was figuring out how to balance economic development with the emotional and spiritual well-being of his people. Although economical growth can't be the only goal, a flourishing economy gives the government the funds needed to provide a working health and educational system, as well as certain living standards. Because being healthy, having opportunities for the future, and knowing that security, a steady income, housing, or well-balanced time use are guaranteed is crucial for people to be happy. But furthermore, people get a lot of positive energy from being with others and sharing interests. Participating in cultural life and to hold up local traditions and cultural heritage lead to a stronger community feeling. Healthy family relationships, advocating community activities, and religious aspects are factors for achieving happiness. It gives the Bhutanese people a strong sense of values and identity. The fourth Dragon King reigned 34 years, basing his decisions on all factors of gross national happiness, asking himself, what makes Bhutan's people happy? And the fourth Dragon King lived by example, leading a very simple life. In fact, he believed so strongly in the concept of GNH, he even decided to hand over sovereignty to the people. In 2006, he retired as king at the age of 52 and changed the course of history. 2 years later, in 2008, Bhutan elected its first representative parliament. Since then, the idea of gross national happiness has taken quite some momentum outside of Bhutan, with other countries and people around the world thinking about adopting the GNH approach to strive for development with values and to make the world a happier place.
It's time for a reflection activity. This is when you reflect on the lesson. Think about it by doing a little activity in your book. So it's a 3, 2, 1. What are 3 things you've learned? 2 things that you found interesting. I really hope you found at least 2 things interesting. Could be from the video, could be from the notes, could be from the amazing pills of wisdom that just drop from my mouth, and 1 question that you still have. Thank you. Keep it real.